Welcome to St. Augustine College lecture series, Transforming Latinos Through Knowledge. Today, we are going to discuss about the impact that COVID is having on Latinos, but more specifically, how can a bilingual education prepare Latinos for the future, and how a multicultural education can be the social and economic development of our country. To start our conversation, I want to introduce you a friend, a colleague, and someone that I admire a great deal. I admire him because of his accomplishments, but more importantly, because of his dedication to helping Latinos. This person is Antonio Flores, a doctor, and also the president and CEO of the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities, one of the most influential organizations in the country that promote higher education for Latinos. Doctor Flores, bienvenido a su casa. Siempre es un placer verlo. Dr. Flores, welcome to the Latino lecture series. It is always a pleasure to have you. How are you today?
Thank you. Thank you very much for those very kind words, Reyes. And obviously, we do share a lot in common. Both of us come from the same little town in Jalisco, Mexico. And I think we also share a great deal of perspective or vision on leadership, which is to serve. And I think the fact that we are now having this conversation will allow us to dig into some of our personal histories, professional histories, and project them into where we're facing today in higher education and with the COVID pandemic. So thank you for inviting me to this very fine institution that is one of the 18 founding members of JACU in 1986. And this college has a very special place in JACU's heart and in mine, because obviously it's one of the founding institutions of JACU, but also because you now are leading this college so well, and we are very proud of your leadership here. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation.
Antonio, thank you very much. As I mentioned, you have been an inspiration for me, and I don't think that I mentioned this to you, but you're one of the reasons that I pursued my doctorate degree. So thank you for inspiring so many of us. Can you share a little bit about your life history, how you came to be who you are today, and how bilingual education influenced your education and your career?
Absolutely. Obviously, it's a long story that I'm going to compress into a few minutes of conversation, because from San Jose Casas Caídas in the 1950s, when I was growing up there as a child, to San Antonio, Texas today, there are a lot of events, people, places, and times that are in between. And I'm just going to highlight some of those that I feel are most relevant to our conversation. And probably the one thing that is going to be a thread across the different milestones that I will try to summarize is the reality of mentoring, that I had a lot of help along the way from that little town where the highest level of education when I was there was 5th grade. And so to get even my elementary school completed, I had to leave town. I was fortunate that a family of teachers that came to San Jose took me with them to Chapala, where I actually graduated from elementary school. Now, obviously, 5th grade might seem like very low level of education, but when my parents were kids, the highest level of education was 2nd grade. So by the time I came around, it was like 150% higher. And so to come from there to where we are today, of course, I had to go through a lot of hoops and a lot of opportunities. And the first one was that one when they took me out San Jose to Chapala, and then I discovered a whole new world of possibilities. And from there, I went to high school, and the family of teachers who took me under their wing when they took me from San Jose to Chapala were just so generous and so caring, and they were my second mentors, because to me the first mentors and teachers that we have are our parents and our families. So I went on to college in Mexico to get a degree in teacher education. Subsequently, I got a second degree in business administration, and it got into my head that I wanted to get a graduate degree. But in Mexico, the chances were almost nil for someone like me, without money or connections. So I came to the US with the hope of doing that, and I was very lucky to find a lot of people along the way who helped me, beginning with my English as second language teacher in Milwaukee, Alicia de la Cruz, and from there on it was just like nonstop in terms of opportunities, both professionally and educationally. But the one thing that also is really of tremendous value in along the way in all of these experiences is the fact that I came without English, and I learned from scratch the language at the same time that I was actually improving my Spanish by learning English the way I did. And that helped me a lot. So it became very quickly somewhat bilingual and bicultural and so forth. And throughout my time here, I have done nothing but learn more English continually as best we can, at the same time that I relearn Spanish, because obviously Spanish, when I grew up there and went to college, they didn't teach us how to write coherent sentences and paragraphs. And here I learned to do that in English, and then transfer that back to my writing in Spanish as well. So this has been tremendously valuable to me. So anyone who has a chance of cultivating Spanish along with English, that's a way to go, because it opens tremendously new doors for your professional advancement. And so I got my master's degree while I was working at Hope College and going to Western Michigan University. Subsequently, I got my PhD at the University of Michigan, and at the same time worked for the state of Michigan in their higher education area, where I became eventually the director for the state of Michigan for higher education programs. And from there, I came to Haku, and I've been here more than 20 years. And every moment that I've been with Haku has been really a tremendous delight and challenge at the same time. Because embedded in all of this is my sense of leadership, which is service to my community, service to people in general, and using the tools that I have learned along the way to help others help themselves through education. Because I believe that education, particularly higher education in our times, is really the key to not only a successful career, but to a fulfilling life. And so I hope that our young people in our community continue to try very hard to strive to excel in their education and move as high as they can through the numerous opportunities available in this country. And so, in a nutshell, I just want to say that mentoring has been the key to my life advancement. And of course, in that journey, uh, every milestone that we reach in our life journey is really a consequence of prior milestones that you went through and you learn from to apply to new situations and then move on to the next challenge. So we're never idle. We're always learning, and we're always striving for excellence and for service. And so that's kind of the way I've been going through life. with a lot of help from a lot of people that I remember with a lot of gratitude, and I will always be thankful for all they did for me. And so now I'm trying to also obviously give back to my community. It's a way of giving back what I do as part of my work and helping younger generations to achieve their dreams for a higher education and a better life than perhaps their parents had. Because as I said before, my parents, God bless them, they only had a second grade education in San Jose. And I remember one of my daughters going there once, asking my dad how far he had gone to school. My dad said, well, I went up to second grade. My daughter said, well, why did you quit so soon? And then he goes, no, I didn't quit. I graduated with honors because that was as high as he could go. And she just couldn't understand that reality. But that was her reality then. And now our realities are very different. And we have to make the most of them, including this pandemic that we're going through. As someone said, don't let a crisis go to waste. And we're in the middle of one.
We are, yes. Well, Antonio, what a remarkable story, and thank you for sharing it with us. What I also hear as I'm listening to your story es que sí se puede. Con muchos esfuerzos podamos realizar todos nuestros sueños. And I was just saying that with efforts, we can achieve all of our dreams through our education. Because Antonio was just describing to us the journey that we come here without knowing how to speak English, but nevertheless, we are do what we need to do to be successful. And through the help of others, we're able to succeed. The other thing that I heard is that about the importance of a bilingual education. Unfortunately, there's a lot of our students that are graduating from high schools that do not speak fluent English. So we need to help them, as Antonio was saying, so that they can achieve all of their dreams. And Antonio, can you tell us a little bit about how you see that a bilingual and multicultural education can help, well, not only our students, but also the development of our country? Because as we, of us Latinos in the United States, and there's approximately 30% of us that still are not fluent with English. So can you tell us your national perspective on
obviously, yeah, much of what happens in our country here in the US and in other countries as well is the economy. The economy drives most public activity, and including, of course, education, and including the uses of language other than English, like Spanish. That's why we have all this marketing going on all over the airwaves and social media and all kinds of ways, marketing to Latinos and Spanish. And we have networks, entire networks like Univision and Telemundo and others that is 100% Spanish 24 hours a day because there is a market. And the Latino market now represents about $2.3 trillion annually of purchasing power. That would make us the 8th largest economy if Latinos were a country. So there is a lot of economic power behind all of that, the reality of our demography. And corporate America understands that. And that's why they are always looking for bilingual, bicultural professionals and technicians to work for them because they can maximize the selling of what they make or they simply sell. And so in my work, I do have the chance to interact a lot also with corporations. And I know that they are looking for bilingual, especially those who are fluent in the reading and writing, and of course, speaking of Spanish as well as English, to work with them because they have operations throughout Latin America and Spain and other Spanish-speaking countries. And they want people who are able to connect with them and to sell or interact for business purposes with them. So the economy drives a lot of that. But then obviously culture is basically central to language and vice versa. And in our case, our own culture, of course, has already influenced this country tremendously. Not only the food, not only the entertainment, not only fashion, not only everything that you see, the construction of houses, the architecture, you name it, just everything. And of course, language is central to culture. And we have to make sure that our younger generations view this as what it is, an asset, not only for them as individuals, but for their families and for the country, because the country's economy depends obviously greatly on international trade. And that requires language skills that are effective in dealing with other countries that use Spanish as their primary language. And so there are all kinds of reasons, both economic, personal, social, cultural, that really make for a very compelling set of reasons to not only maintain but improve your Spanish continually, along with your English, of course.
Yes, we spoke about the influence that Latinos have in the United States, but do you think that we're also having similar interests with the purchasing power that Latin America is having, and how Latinos in the United States can also service and influence what is happening in Latin America?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of opportunity there to expand and to deepen our relationships with countries south of the border as a Latino community to the benefit of both sides. Let me just give you an example. In higher education, obviously, HACU has now membership in Latin America and Spain. And of course, the members that we have affiliated from those countries really value the relationship because it allows them to connect with institutions in the US and to promote themselves as universities and to also create opportunities for their students, their faculty, for exchanges and so forth and so on. And obviously that would not be as easy to be done if we didn't have within HACU itself the expertise of our staff to deal with both sides and understand the cultural nuances of Mexico and Latin America and Spain and the ones in the US. So we have a chance to be a bridge, basically, between this huge economy and the rest of the Spanish-speaking countries. And I think that those countries south of the border are beginning to recognize more and more that they have for too long neglected to connect more successfully with us as a national community. Think about the fact that we are more than 62 million people already in the US, that we are the second largest Hispanic country in the world after Mexico. Mm-hmm. And in terms of GDP, as I said before, $2.3 trillion is much more than Mexico's GDP. And so we do have all the necessary ingredients and more to successfully launch an initiative of connecting much more intensely, deeply, and meaningfully with all these countries south of the border and Spain and others. And that's not, it shouldn't be the limit. We should also branch out to other countries as a Latino community, whether it's other European nations, Asian nations, you name it, and promote that our younger generations have the opportunity to become even multilingual and multicultural and contribute even more so to the development of this nation, as well as to their own personal and family improvements.
Yes, it's interesting what you're telling me is, as we know, Latinos are entrepreneurs, and they are the fastest growing ethnic group in the country, but not only in size, in number of Latinos, but also in the number of small businesses that are being started. If I remember correct, there's for every one business that's started by other ethnic groups, there are 8 Latinos that are started on an annual basis in the United States. The other thing that I think about is you were describing the impact and the influence of Haku nationally and internationally, is that I see Haku being a connector with the academia across the world for any institution that is interested in, that has any connections with Latin America. So congratulations for that. And that's also something that we see with St. Augustine College. We also see ourselves as an institution that is not only serves Latinos, but also that promotes our culture. So we're also looking to have a role in connecting not only with our community here locally, but internationally, so that we can promote our language and our culture, and also the value that we bring to this wonderful country. But as how do you see Haku getting involved, or how do you see Haku's culture and also language being influencing its success? Because Haku has grown considerably during your tenure as president of Haku.
Well, obviously, we have matured as a national and international association with more than 500 member institutions in our mix. And of course, realize that we have now the accumulated experience and know-how to move to the next level of advocacy for the language and culture that prevails primarily in our community, Spanish language and culture. And in fact, we think it's time for us to start developing a culture within higher education across the board to promote proficiency in a language other than English for those who are graduating from college at whatever level they are able to perform, but they have to demonstrate some minimum level and then have an endorsement on their certificates of studies indicating at what level they had performed well in that second language. And of course, Spanish would be the by far most important second language after English to be part of that process. And at the same time, I think we have to also stimulate our friends south of the border and in other countries to do the same thing with English so that their students can graduate over there with some proficiency in English and be more effective contributors as professionals, as technicians, as whatever they might happen to be, business persons, etc., to the development of their countries, because economically and socially, it makes all the sense in the world. So we are in the middle of a process of defining how we're going to promote that and when we're going to launch it and who are going to be the partners to do the assessment abroad for English as a second language proficiency, and in the US of Spanish as a second language or as a language, because for some it will be their native language, but to have certifiable value added on their certificates once they complete a degree program. And I think that will elevate not only the importance of the language, but the social and economic value of our culture as well. And when we're in the middle of this polarized society that we're in the US, with a lot of racist connotations and obviously anti-immigrant proclamations and whatnot, something like this will really help to neutralize some of that rhetoric that is so divisive. And of course, we look forward to doing that in the years ahead. And of course, my wife keeps reminding me that I should be, my next big move should be retirement. and that I'm long overdue. So I don't know. Some of these things I might see them evolve. I get started, and hopefully I'll be able to contribute in their advancement.
Antonio, I don't see you retiring anytime soon.
Well,
And I can agree with you more that we need to change the way that our approach to our language and our culture and who we are in the United States. Here at San Agustin College, as you may know, we were one of the pioneers in bilingual education, and this started some 40 years ago. And our focus was to help students get into entry-level jobs that require a higher education. But what we have recognized, yes, like you have more recently, that it's not just important for our students to learn to speak English and to do it well, but also not to forget about our own language, and to also help them to graduate with proficiency in Spanish as well. So we are developing our curriculum and the way that the education that we provide, so that our students, when they graduate, they are just as proficient in English as they are in Spanish. Furthermore, that we celebrate our culture, that it's not just enough for us to be able to learn our language, but also our culture and just who we are as a society. We are also thinking about becoming this institution in the United States where people like yourselves can send their grandchildren so that they can learn about the heritage of their grandparents, their language, their history, their music, a place where they can learn about our culture. As you stated, today there are over 62 million of us. Soon, one of every 5 Americans here in the United States are going to be Latinos. So we need to be a place where we can celebrate our heritage and our culture and just continue this. And it sounds to me that this is exactly what we're doing, what you're doing at HACU also, is promoting our culture. Are you seeing this movement or this need to develop or to teach about our culture at other institutions that are members of HACU?
Yeah, some of them are. And of course, some are because of their location. I mean, you are in Chicago, but we have to remember that almost half of the immigrants coming to Chicago and to Illinois are from Latin America, most from Mexico and Central American countries. But so that is not going to stop. It's going to continue. And so the influx of people with that background are really prime prospects for institutions like yours, because they need a place where they not only can identify with the prevailing values and culture of the institution, but the opportunities to develop their language skills in English and keep their Spanish language skills, along with whatever career they are able to study for, and become much more employable and successful in our economy. And so that's happening everywhere. Okay, if I mean, now you see how Latinos are almost in every state of the union in large numbers, not just in the traditional states of the Southwest and others. But even in states like Texas, where we live in Texas, more than half of all the children in K-12 here in the state of Texas, about 55% of them are Hispanic, mostly Mexican origin. The same is true in California. These are the 2 largest states in the nation. So we really have a tremendous, unprecedented opportunity to help this country regain not only its vision for a country that embraces diversity and immigrants, but is also going to be successful in the global economy, where multi-language skills, multicultural skills will really be so critical. And yes, there are some in in places, obviously, like I mentioned, in the border, at the border with Texas or California, et cetera, because it's so natural. I mean, that they are right by the border, and there's a lot of fluidity of people. For instance, UTEP, for example, University of Texas El Paso. A lot of the students are really from Juarez, Mexico, and they come every day to go to school there. And so they have to have some curriculum and content and the language they command best and cultural reflections of that population. And so I give you their example, but there are many more.
Sure.
Obviously, in Puerto Rico, which is an island, of course, they are primarily teaching, well, they actually teach with English textbooks, but they teach orally in Spanish for the most part. So they are really doing both, kind of reinforcing their their Spanish at the same time that they are improving their English. And so, but I think your institution has a unique opportunity to really have an impact on the Chicago area community, particularly because you were the first one that was founded as a bilingual college back in 40 years ago, and the demography continues to expand, the one that you intend to serve. And so to me, it's almost like impossible. It's almost unavoidable that more bilingual institutions like yours will emerge and identify themselves as such all over the country. But it's a gradual process. It's not something that will happen from one day to the next, especially when you have all this rhetoric of really totally unfounded fear about the U.S. Becoming more like a Latino country or immigrant country, and the people who feel like they are entitled to this land or whatever, resenting that and so forth. But the fact of the matter is that immigrants, and I'm one of them, just like you are. You came to this country as a child. I came as an adult, but we really have to work 3 times as hard to get only half as far, and that it really yields a lot of value to a country, that people like ourselves go the extra mile to do things not only right, but also to do what is right. And that's how I think our country will improve, by having more and more leadership that feels that way and acts that way.
Yes, and I fully agree with you in what you're saying, that our country, the United States, has become a superpower, not but because the intellectual capacity that it was able to create, but rather because he was able to attract the best minds from across the country, and these minds happen to be immigrants, yes, like you and like many other people that come to this country to do some wonderful things. But now as we move forward, I also recognize the importance of the Latino community, because if the United States are not allowing other immigrants to come in, here's an opportunity also for the Latino community to step in and to become this intellectual capacity for the United States. But for that, we need to provide opportunities to Latinos, just like you and I had this opportunity to go to higher education. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do here at St. Augustine College. We are reorganizing ourselves so that we can provide training or education to Latinos in the areas of greatest growth and in areas where we can help them to break the cycle of poverty. So we are going to focus our education in 3 areas: in the areas of STEM, in the areas of healthcare and social science, and education. But we're doing things that probably no one else is doing across the country, and that is we are focusing our education for Latinos. We have created a new model of education that we call the Latino education model. But it's not just, we're not only focusing on quality education, we're also focusing on providing accessibility and affordable education. We're going to continue to be an open enrollment institution. And we are going to provide high quality education that's affordable. So students that are qualified will be able to come to our college and get a college education basically for free. For the most part, they would only have to pay $100 for the books. As we know, one of the greatest impediments for Latinos is our inability to pay for education. So I'm inviting all of the Latinos that are interested in a high quality education in those areas to come to us and get a college education for $100 a semester. What do you think there, Antonio? Do you know of other institutions that are doing something similar like this, that are focused in the education for Latinos?
There is a saying that be careful what you wish, because you might get a flood of Latinos for that kind of bargain that you are presenting to them for a quality higher education, which and bilingual, bicultural on top of all of that. So that I think is a terrific vision that you have on how to move San Agustin forward, because in fact, demographically, it makes all the sense in the world, and in the heart of Chicago, very diverse, very large Latino community, growing every single day by leaps and bounds, by the influx of immigrants, but also of the kids that are being born there from prior immigrants. And so I think you have all the makings for a very successful enterprise as you move forward in this century and beyond, because obviously your best days, in my view, are yet to come. And with your leadership, I think San Agustin is in great hands, and you'll make it happen. Because obviously, the first thing you need for an institution to succeed is someone who has a vision that is compatible with the mission of the institution. And this institution was created with that particular mission of serving particularly the underdog, if you will, the neediest community, in this case, the Latino community, and do it in a way that not only respects, but embraces their heritage, their language, their culture, and incorporates it into the curriculum of the institution and makes it work for them, not against them. And so that I think you have a lot to share, to teach other institutions to do things like what you have in mind, because we need it. We need it across the country and beyond. And of course, Kaku, I mentioned to you, is in the midst of developing the necessary framework for Spanish proficiency endorsement in the U.S. At the same time that someone gets a college degree, then they can be assessed to see at what level they would be proficient in Spanish, and recognize in their certificate and their diploma. So when they go to employers, they can actually say not only they are bilingual, but certified that they are, and they will give them an edge in terms of employability and mobility in their careers. Because frankly, I look back on my own career, and if I had not been bilingual, bicultural, probably I would not have been able to move in the way I did in my career by just being monolingual. And frankly, I said at the beginning that when you start learning English as second language from zero, as I did back then, you begin to compare how English evolves in your life with Spanish. And then you realize that you have a lot of improvements to make in your own Spanish. In my case, it was writing, because I could talk a lot in Spanish. I mean, Cantinflas it was nothing for me. I mean, but between that and writing things coherently, it's a big difference. And my writing was more like Cantinflas talking nonstop. And thank God I was able to correct that as I was learning English, and it helped me a lot, to the point that as I was working in other places later on, actually my superiors sometimes, not sometimes, but most of the time, will pass by me a piece of correspondence or a report that would go to the higher ups for proofing and reviewing, editing before sending it. And I think that skill came from my learning English as a second language and relearning Spanish, because I also, it's like a give and take, both from both languages. And you kind of nurture those two sides to the point where you sometimes don't even realize whether you're talking in English or in Spanish, but you are just talking.
Yeah,
just like now.
Yeah, you're very humble, and I'm sure that you were not speaking like Cantinflas, but nevertheless, Cantinflas is one of our idols also. But I'm sure that you were very eloquent. We're coming to the end of our time together, and I don't know if we have any questions from the audience. Rafael, are there any questions that the audience may have for Dr. Flores?
Please, guys, if you guys have any questions, put it on the chat. We have some comments here, and let's see. What is the recommendation for fundraising, Dr. Antonio Flores? If you can answer that question.
For fundraising for whom or for what?
I'm assuming for an institution today.
Oh, okay. Well, I think one thing that your fundraising efforts could incorporate is precisely that vision that Dr. Gonzalez just shared with us about highlighting St. Augustine's bilingual, bicultural curriculum, and the people that you serve, the demographics of who you are serving, who are people who would normally not have a chance to go to college, and to really improve both in English and Spanish and be employable in careers that will help our economy. That to me would be a very important aspect to highlight. Okay, it's asking me to share my webcam, which I guess I didn't have it. But I was thinking that also, of course, you want to highlight the fact that your graduates would be serving the community in a variety of ways, whether it's social work, whether it's in businesses, whatever it is, in a professional manner, and helping others do the same, pursue higher education and continue to generationally enrich our community, improve our community. And of course, I think that those are elements of your life as an institution that will be very appealing to funders, and in terms of who you serve and how you do it and why you do it. And so I think that there is a great opportunity there for your fundraising to be successful.
Dr. Antonio, there's another question here in Spanish. I'm gonna try to translate it. I think it's a really interesting one.
Okay.
It talks about if you ever feel discriminated by your own community, and if that was the case from supervisors or others, and what did you do to overcome the problem of discrimination?
Well, that question reminds me of a book that I read many years ago by a Brazilian author, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Paul Freire wrote that book. Paulo Freire is a Brazilian, I frankly don't know if he's still alive, but anyway. And essentially, the thesis of that book was that people who have been oppressed and find their way to, in quotes, success somewhere, can become even worse oppressors of their own people than those who used to oppress them, because they feel insecure about their own positions of new power. And therefore, they have to appear before the oppressors as if they are even tougher than they are with their own people. And that explains a lot of behaviors like that. I personally don't recall having a situation as bad as that ever. No, I have right now I have 18 board members. Dr. Gonzalez is one of them, but I have a diversity of members on my board, 18, that include Latinos and non-Latinos, and I have never felt anything other than support and a lot of compassion on their part for what we do, and empathy and so forth and so on. So I guess maybe if I did, I didn't catch it, but if I ever was in a situation like that, but I do realize that that can actually happen and be a very difficult challenge to overcome because of what Paulo Freire said and that particular book.
Here's another question, Doctor. How do you suggest getting other non-Hispanic serving institutions to take us seriously or to see us as competitors?
Well, it's a great question. And I want to say that one of the things that we recognize as an association is that obviously there is a hierarchy of sorts in higher education among institutions, just as there is a hierarchy of sorts among almost everything in our society, for better or for worse. I mean, those are the top, the research intensive, research one institutions that feel that they are on top of the world. And then the ones, regional universities that are below them, that don't have as much research activity, who feel less than that, or are made feel less than those at the top. And then there are those colleges at the bottom that a lot of, especially community colleges and other developing institutions that don't have a lot of resources, but are doing great service, and they are not always treated with the respect and with the caring that needs to be shown by the upper ones. And so we recognize all of that because we have them in our association. And in my own board, I have 3 research one intensive universities. Those are among the top institutions in the country in my board, the CEOs of those. And then I have others that are in regional universities and others that are in community colleges and so forth. And that gives me the chance to think about how can we also make something like my board happen in the broader world. And we concluded that we need to have consortia of institutions created on areas of common interest, like, let's say, STEM education, STEM fields. Everyone wants to have a degree in engineering or technology or whatnot, no matter what level, because we need technicians from community college, we need engineers from regional universities, and we need scientists from the top institutions. But if they can work together to create pathways of success for Latino students from those at the bottom to all the way to the top, they will put them in a situation where they're going to collaborate and not compete per se in a negative way, but collaborate for the common good of the consortium. And we could create that nationally to diffuse all of that and to really optimize the richness of the diversity of institutions that we have.
We have a couple of more questions, Doctor.
Mhm.
The next one is, will Hispanic serving institutions survive financially from the COVID pandemic?
Obviously, it's a little early to tell how all this is going to settle down after the pandemic is behind us. But unfortunately, I can see that some of our institutions that are more uh, challenged financially could have a real hard time uh, getting through it, and especially those that depend primarily on enrollment and are not having success for a variety of reasons, keeping their numbers up and in terms of enrollment, because obviously most institutions have gone either in online or hybrid programs. Some have gone in person, but have had a lot of problems with that effort and have backtracked and gone either hybrid or totally online. And the challenge there for many of those under-resourced institutions is that if they didn't have the infrastructure, the technology, to the platforms to provide content, the programs they offer, the courses online effectively with the faculty prepared to do it and to back them up and so forth, and the staff, well, it's a challenge right there. And if they didn't have the money to take care of all those things, then you have that problem at the end. But at the other end, at the receiving end, if the students of those institutions who happen to be, for the most part, low income, don't have at home the broadband technology devices and what is needed for them to effectively learn online, and they don't even have the experience doing it, the discipline to learn by them, not by themselves, but in that mode, we're going to have problems at both ends. So there has to be a very heavy investment, both from the federal government and from the private sector, including major foundations and corporations, because we are all in this boat called America, and we are all going to swim or sink together. And I think those who are better off financially need to help those that are not as well. And we all have to make the best effort to not only survive, but thrive as we go forward.
One more question regarding the topic, Doctor. How
Okay.
will HAKU support programs to overcome the digital inequalities with the Latino community?
Well, fortunately, we're already doing some of that, but obviously the amount of resources of money from the federal government is inadequate. But we, for instance, have uh, some funding available for capacity building under Title V that many institutions can use for technology. And especially in these times when COVID requires that you do it that way. So I can see that a lot of more proposals will be going for funding of technology related ways of teaching and learning as opposed to whatever else was going on before. And, you know, we're talking about 120 some $1 million in Title V. And then there's another $100 million in Title III Part F, which can be used also for that, and particularly with emphasis on STEM programs. And we have in the NSF now a new program that started 3 years ago and is moving up in funding, but not fast enough. I think it's now about $45 million, and other pots that we're creating, but all of that together doesn't really make as big a difference. Fortunately, in the last round of, well, the only round of stimulus package for higher education that happened last April, we were able to shake off about $214 million from MSI set aside funding for all of the minority serving institutions, specifically for HSIs, to help them in any way they wanted to apply those funds to the COVID situation. in addition to the big pot of money that was divided among all higher education institutions. And I think our institutions collectively, the more than 500, received about $3 billion in the what it called the HARE funds, the Higher Education Relief and Funds. And half of that money was for students, grants for the students to help themselves with necessities that they had immediately. And the other half was for the institutions to do the same. And so we will continue to push hard with Congress, but we need help from our own institutions and our community to make a compelling case with Congress that it is in the interest of our country to support these institutions that are still way behind the curve, because we only get about 68 cents per student annually at our HSIs for every dollar that goes to the rest of the field across the country, and we serve the neediest students with less money. So we're going to continue working hard for that to change, and hopefully with help of our institutions and our communities and convincing their members of Congress, we will succeed.
One last question, Dr. Antonio, and then we can close out, I guess. What opportunities and limitations do you see for the area of assessment and the measuring aspects of education within the Hispanic community?
I'm sorry, on their assessment and what else?
Measuring aspects of education.
Well, obviously, yeah, it's an area that is somewhat, I don't want to use the word, but I can't come up with any other controversial, because obviously, historically, there has been a double-edged sword for especially underrepresented populations in higher education. As you know, when it comes to entrance examinations and all of that, our students don't always perform as well because they are not accustomed to taking those standardized tests. And of course, fewer of them are admitted to selective institutions, for one of the reasons being that. And then in K-12, there's always the caveat of having young people whose primary language may not be English being tested in English entirely, and therefore is culturally biased. And so assessment, I think, is an area that lends itself from a positive perspective to a great deal of innovative work to make it culturally compatible with communities like ours, culturally relevant, and to make it a valuable tool, not so much to exclude people from opportunities like college entrance, but to help students improve academically once we know what areas they are more in need of help with. So assessment again in psychometrics and all that, I think is an area that our institutions themselves probably will continue to do work going forward, and there is a need for that across the board. As you might know, some of the selective institutions in the country have been doing away with the SAT and the ACT. They no longer use it. They just use high school grades and other things, but not standardized test results.
Thank you, Dr. Flores. And these are all the questions that they have.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Flores, well, thank you for sharing your wisdom and your time with us. Muchas gracias por todo. Siempre es un placer. Do you have any last words for our audience that you would like to share with us?
Only that it has been a pleasure for me to be part of this conversation and your lecture series, and I commend you for everything that you're doing so well and with so much wisdom, because obviously, I truly believe that our community's days ahead will be much better than the ones we're living now or have lived before, and that higher education is going to be crucial to that better future for our community. And San Agustin's contribution to that will be invaluable. So I commend you for 40 years of great service to our community and wish you 40 and many more successful years going forward.
Well, thank you. And as we all know, it is not the president that does anything, but rather the team that's behind him and that supports him. And I can say that we have a wonderful family of Latinos here that making opportunities for other Latinos to get ahead. And we are transforming Latino lives through knowledge.
Terrific.
Welcome to this series, and I hope that you will join us again. Dr. Flores, mil gracias y cuídese. Take care of yourselves.
Gracias. Hasta luego.